Hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner. I'm a critic, consultant, and programmer based in Toronto, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Alex Winter, an actor who became a generational icon when he co-starred with Keanu Reeves in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and then forged a really interesting career as a filmmaker in his own right, with features like Fever and Freaked, which is getting a new restoration next month, and the documentaries Downloaded, Deep Web, and Zappa, among others. His latest is Adulthood, a dark comedy about two siblings, played by Josh Gad and Kaya Scodelario, whose discovery of a body in the basement of their childhood home kicks off a chain reaction of desperate decisions and awful consequences. It premiered in TIFF's Midnight Madness program last week and opens in select theaters today, Friday, September 19th. Oh, and, Alex is currently on Broadway with Reeves in a revival of Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot at the Hudson Theater. I almost forgot about that. Alex picked Los Olvidados, Luis Bunuel's 1951 drama about a group of children and young adults living in poverty in Mexico City. Their leader, the violent El Jaibo, has just returned after a stint in detention, determined to find the kid who turned him in, and Pedro, who just wants to learn a trade and improve his circumstances, gets roped into the search. Savaged by Mexican critics for its bleak point of view, the film won Bunuel the Best Director prize at Cannes and has only grown in stature in the decades since, though these days it is a little harder to find than some of his work. But no less important. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Well, first of all, it's good to see you, and good to be here. It's been a whirlwind, so it's nice to stop and talk about movies for a second. It feels like a very lovely respite from my wonderful but very intense life at the moment.
It is how I pitch the podcast on press tours. It's like, plug me in the middle. We'll loosen everybody up, and they can go back to work.
Exactly. No, it's welcome. I had been a Bunuel fan as a young cineast. I think I was turned on to Exterminating Angel first when I was in high school, and enjoyed it very much. And Viridiana, and obviously the sort of the films he's most famous for are his latter period. A lot of the films he did with Jean-Claude Carrière that were the festival darlings, and Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie and all of that, Phantom of Liberty. But when I found the two films that impacted me, or three, I would say, actually, are L'Âge d'Or, Land Without Bread, and Los Olvidados. And to this day, those are my three favorite Bunuel films. And I prefer them to the latter period films, which are good, but I feel in a way... I remember when he made L'Âge d'Or, he really wanted to, or even Chien Andalou, he really wanted to attack the status quo and to shake it up, and not to be a provocateur, but to really try to get at some of the hypocrisies and the corruption and the things that were leading to the fascist rise that was going on in the world at that time. And he was appalled by the reaction, which was very celebrated. He didn't want to celebrate a reaction. He's like, oh my God. He says, these people that I wanted to attack love my movie. I'm mortified. Land Without Bread, which is one of my favorite films, and it's a documentary, but it's a pseudo-documentary, is really about it's almost about what I would call today what we think of as poverty porn, right? In our current cinematic climate, where a lot of usually privileged middle or upper class people, or people who come out of poverty, I don't know if it matters so much, but make these very beautiful, poetic depictions of people who are struggling. And they always kind of remind me of those National Geographic movies where they go into like an African, veldt somewhere, and they film, the loss of water, and they just have a camera trained on a hippopotamus as it dies of dehydration, as opposed to just getting the damn thing out of the mud and saving its life, right? And on day 12, we see the hippopotamus is now entering the final stages of malnutrition. And you're like, just get the damn thing to a vet, guys. And I think that there's a lot of that very beautifully and profoundly in Los Olvidados. I think that it is a film that can appear very cruel. I think that the surrealism is not its point. I think that it's there to serve a purpose. It's not there to be irrational for irrationality's sake, which is a big part of surrealism, and I like that when it's done that way. I think that and it was an outrage. It was outrageous to the Mexican populace when it was released. It was made during his time in Mexico, in I think 1950. In my opinion, it was made as somewhat of a reaction to the Italian neorealist, the De Sica and Rossellini films like Bicycle Thief, which were these very beautiful, poetic, kind of lilting examinations of poverty, often made by very bourgeois people.
Mhm.
Good movies. I'm not here to disparage them. That's not the point. But I think speaking about Bunuel and where he was at his life and what was going on in the world at that time, coming out of this incredibly difficult fascist period, and obviously what was going on in Spain, which is where he was from. Um, he was very deeply anti-fascist, and I think he felt that it was somewhat of a contribution to fascism to not go farther and try to dig further into the human condition and show the fully rounded nature and the cyclical nature of poverty. And that this idea that he felt, I think, that the neorealists would sometimes espouse, and I think our current poverty sort of porn movies espouse this as well, is this idea that, love will conquer all, or if you just find the right guy, you'll be okay, or everyone is inherently good, so it'll probably work out, or whatever. And I think Bunuel was looking to say, we're never going to get past these cycles of fascism if we don't stop and examine what's really going on, which is that human nature at its root can be corrupted, no matter who you are. Even the blind man in this film who is being beaten on is a grifter. I mean, he's going after children, and no one is safe from Bunuel's examination in this movie. And to me, that's again, it's not a provocation. To me, that's really a beautiful, daring, revolutionary act. And the film holds up for me in this way. I just find it infinitely moving when I watch it. It's a better film than Land Without Bread, which is in some ways a provocation. It's just a very entertaining one. But I think it's a more mature film and a more passionate and profound look at the cycles of poverty and the kind of degradations of human nature at its worst.
Yeah, it struck me. I have to admit, it's harder to find these days than I thought it would be. So I didn't get a chance to rewatch it when I found out it was your choice. But what struck me about it was how he avoids the hand wringing that all of these films end with. I mean, with the possible exception of some of the, like, even the stuff from the early 2000s, like City of God or Slumdog Millionaire, where you have directors embracing the slick commercial cinema to tell a story about people transcending. And in City of God, that comes with graphic violence and the like people in bikinis to sell the pure, what is it, like the pure animal nature of humanity,
Right.
with violence and sex, which I can see the
Sure. Of
aesthetic argument, but I don't.
course.
Like, I don't think it's like what Kubrick said about the anti-war film. It's ultimately impossible because you're shooting beautiful people in dynamic shots, so it's going to look like you're finding something appealing about it. And then with Slumdog Millionaire, Danny Boyle has a scene where a character like literally climbs through a river of shit to get what he wants. And it's like, I get it. It's a terrific visual metaphor, and it's probably why audiences responded to it so well. But in both of those cases, that seemed like the modern take was missing the idea that Bunuel is simply presenting hopelessness.
Yes.
And it's not glamorous at all. It's just people climbing on each other, trampling each other, walking over each other, killing each other, just for a couple of minutes at the top. Like, that's the thing that's missing from all of these other films. That's anything that these characters can claw for themselves is transient. And Bicycle Thieves, I suppose, has an ironic version of that. But this is, yeah, it's what you were saying. It's stripped of irony. It's stripped of metaphor. You are watching the struggle. And at the very end, the only thing left is, oh, right, that's not stopping. It's just, it doesn't, I want to say despairing, but I don't think it's even that emotional. It's simply clinical. The movie leaves you with the understanding that nothing will change.
Yeah, and it's funny because out of that, for me, grows emotion. Because I find Bunuel to be a very emotional person. Maybe because I know so much about his biography as well, and he was a very emotional person. I mean, he would get into fights with people. He and Dali famously, literally fought physically over fascism. I mean, Bunuel really felt that Dali had thrown in with the fascists and the aristocracy and the people that were causing so much pain to the rest of to his homeland. But I find emotion there, and I find great moral and artistic discipline in Bunuel. I realize the older I get, the more I feel he is my very, very favorite filmmaker. And I think it is because of he has enormous discipline in emotion, morality, ethics, religion, spirituality, and the human struggle. I mean, he was a philosophy student, so there's a lot of that in there. But I find that film to be extremely emotional, but it forces you, as you said, it forces you to examine things as they are, and it does not give you an out. And cinema, there's an argument in cinema that I bristle against sometimes, though I understand it, and I like a lot of these movies, so it's understandable, sort of like what you said about the cinematic validity of certain tropes, right? Which are completely valid. And yes, we want them. Otherwise, you end up sounding like the moral majority. Like, stop putting bikinis on film, stop putting guns in movies. Like, that's not at all what I mean. But I do bristle a little at this notion that those types of films are making any kind of artistic, forward-moving, profound statement or even expression, because movies don't have to be a statement. Because I think that out does reduce them, and it gives you a trap door. And I do know that when I was making Adulthood, it is a Trojan horse movie. It lures you in under the pretense of being somewhat of a whimsical family farce, and it gets very serious about halfway through with the continuation of farce and comedy. Like, we don't do a complete tonal shift because the order of events are actually credible. They're not a like a Deus Ex Machina. But that is, to me, is I've always loved that about film's capacity and theater too. Like, we're doing the Beckett play now, and honestly, I'm not like trying to slickly plug my shit. It's just where I'm so in Beckett land right now.
Yeah.
It's all I'm doing all day long, and I'm so immersed in it. But it's not dissimilar from the standpoint. Well, A, they were around at very similar times, but B, there's this notion of just look at the way things are, and out of that comes beauty and emotion. And I find Godot to be a very emotional play, and it bothers me immensely when it's not emotional when I see it, when it's clinical or academic or dry or too clownish. And likewise, I find Bunuel to be very emotional. I find that if you have the capacity to look at something this starkly, and I also find it completely lacks to me the most offensive thing a film artist can do, which is be patronizing, right? Which is to have an observer's safe. It's sort of like I said about the National Geographic narrator. Like, that's what you become. Like, oh, here is this poor child in the Chicago ghetto, and he has no food, and his mother is on food stamps, and he has no way of playing, and he has no play. And you're like, okay, well, why don't you stop making movies and go be a social worker? Like, go help these people. Stop training a lens on them. So I like his ability to not patronize the people whom he supposedly sympathizes with or empathizes with. He gets down in the foxhole with them, and I find that is very hard to do, I think. I think the movie is somewhat miraculous in that way. I'd say for me, it is the zenith of his ability, because some of his later period movies, maybe because he was now so heralded by the film community, and he was getting awards at Cannes every year, funnily enough, after Los Olvidados, and with Los Olvidados. It's not like he got corrupted, but I do feel his movies were catering a lot more to the bourgeoisie once he got more celebrated.
There is always that conflict with someone who is successful, right? Like, is this what you want? Should I keep doing it? And the question is never answered to anyone's satisfaction, the artist or the audience, when that happens. But I was thinking too that Adulthood and Godot and Olvidados all do the same thing, which is what Bunuel did through his entire cinema. What would you do, and why aren't you doing it? Like the simple question of knowing what the right thing is what the wrong thing is. In Godot, these are two men who are clinging together against nothingness, right? Like they're terrified. Every question is a hesitation because they don't want to hear the answer. Olvidados is about people who don't have the God. It's a Passover Haggadah question. They don't know how to ask the question, right? Like they're trapped in a cycle that they don't even understand. They're trapped in. They understand the cycle, like they understand that they're on the bottom and they want to be on the top, but there is no further examination because they don't have time. Like they don't have the education and they don't have the language, and culturally they simply can't see any other option. And then with adulthood, what you have is people who convince themselves that there's no other option and consistently make the wrong choice. And it's absolutely farcical. But also you're watching people just dig a bigger hole for everyone around them.
Yeah, I think that I was interested in taking, because I very much agree with what you just said. I mean, the dilemma in Los Olvidados is that the need to survive and the work that it takes to survive overtakes the ability to stop and look at anything from 1,000-yard view. You're just trying to survive every day. And there's so much in that is so preoccupying. And what I was interested in with adulthood was taking that into the suburbs, was this idea, this whole illusion that the middle class with the privilege, and look, this has become almost parodic in our current climate, this idea, right? Of like, who is really privileged? We're now learning that everyone is on an even playing field except for a handful of oligarchs, right? Like everyone is in the same boat unless you're a billionaire now. And most of us are struggling, and it doesn't matter. And some, yes, the super poor, the refugees in countries where there is war, obviously they're the Los Olvidados. Their lives are just about survival, nothing else. They're not going to football games. They're not, sitting around a dinner table with their kids talking about the workday. But that rot and that fear and that stress is absolutely everywhere. And the notion of the delusion, as you put it, of thinking that level of privilege is going to save you from that life dilemma. I really was interested in that thematically. And I mean, Bunuel has been a North Star for me, and many other people and other writers and all kinds of other stuff, obviously. But cinematically, I do feel that his sort of nexus period, and especially those three films, especially L'Âge d'Or, Land Without Bread, and Los Olvidados, which I think all three are masterpieces and are kind of faultless examinations of these issues in a very beautiful artistic way. But the other thing that I think can be a danger, which I think is becoming a heightened issue now, which you just touched on, which is this idea of that art will save us, right? Or that if it won't save us, that it's enough. If I'm making socially conscious films or films that speak to the times, that is how I'm doing my part. And I think Bunuel was very opposed to that idea in the 40s, right? I can't tell you how opposed I am to that idea in our current climate. As a doc filmmaker, and I really believe in the power of docs. I believe in the power of art. But I don't feel that people would say when I made certain political films, oh, this is like a form of activism. I was like, it is absolutely not activism. It is not journalism. It is storytelling. And yes, it has merit. And yes, it will hopefully awaken someone to something they maybe didn't know or touch them in some way. It has value. But I don't think of myself like that's not, to me, I better get out and do something in the real world if I'm really going to, that doesn't count, right? That's not, because I'm getting paid well. I'm being heralded at film festivals. Like, it is not activism. And I think that idea of which you just touched on, which is what do we do, right? Of sort of demanding people ask of themselves, what should I do? And I think that one of the biggest dilemmas that we face right now, certainly in our country, you guys are in better shape. I mean, pretty much everywhere's in better shape. Well, I know you're skating on the edge. You got problems. So does So does the UK. Like, I mean, I looked at leaving the country. I was like, where am I going to go, really, at this point? But is this question of what do I do? And and I think that our political party, not their political party, I think is paralyzed because they don't know what to do. I think that there is so much paralysis right now in the art community, in the political community, in the sort of, and I think this question, because I think people are now faced with the reality of like, oh, I thought I was kind of doing the right thing. I was going into the voting booth. I would go to the odd, school board meeting, whatever. Clearly, that's just not enough. And Bunuel made films during very intense times in our culture, and he saw that that wasn't enough, and it fired him up in ways that I also find very inspiring.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. This week, I wrote about the Warner Archive Collection's terrific new sets of Errol Flynn, Greta Garbo, and 50s sci-fi, as well as their new restoration of Get Carter, and the Criterion release of Lizzie Borden's underground classic Born in Flames. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io, or find a link at the Simcast Blue Sky account. If you like reading about movies, I like writing about them. Come check it out. I think about the criticisms that were leveled against Los Olvidados at the time, which is that it is just despair and it is just misery and everybody hates everybody else and there's no one to root for. And the one person we think is our hero ends up being betrayed by the story. I think we can flirt with spoilers for an 70-year-old film. But,
yeah.
But the absence of a visible controlling structure, right? There is no one who steps in and says, like, there's no like Chaplin at the end of The Great Dictator breaking character and making his plea to the audience. I think this is what you get from someone who paid attention to the Second World War and watched who was on board and who wasn't with either side, and realizes that the only thing you can do is leave people to think about what their culpability is in the film. If there's like a High and Low is back now because Criterion just reissued it, and Highest to Lowest just came out, and so we're steeped in that, and it's all about the straight line between corporate structure and public manipulation and personal responsibility. There is no I kept thinking there's going to be a factory on a hill here that we see in the background that causes all of this. There's a reason, but there isn't. It's so much better that there is nothing.
Yes.
That you just open and close with these people in this situation, and that there is a sense that people who came to see it at Cannes in formal wear, right? Like that black tie thing, people watching it in cinemas in the 1950s would have dressed up for an evening out. Like it was a thing.
Yeah.
Culturally, to support art by going to see it. But then you sit there and you are not represented, right? If you can afford a movie ticket, you're not in this movie.
That's for sure.
And then you're just left there to think about, it sounds so reductive, but it is like, think about what you've done. Think about what you buy. Think about what you support, all the things that led to this situation in a third world country that you are almost certainly not in.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's scolding. I think it's just leaving the door open, which is so hard to pull off. Like the music isn't manipulative exactly. I mean, it does its job.
Yeah.
But it never crosses the line into sort of maudlin sentimentality or abject misery.
Yeah.
And even I was really shocked because it wasn't, I had seen, as you probably had, I had seen all of his other more popular stuff first, because I first discovered Bunuel. There was no representation of it in Canada when I was a kid. There was nowhere to see it in the early 80s. I saw Belle de Jour, Miramax released that. That was a thing.
Right. Yeah.
Criterion had released some of his films. That's the only way I saw any of his stuff.
That's initially.
Right. And this was so different because it wasn't playful or ironic or mocking. Like he is on their side from the beginning to the end and just watching them get whittled down to nothing or further nothing. And the empathy was something that I was not prepared for.
I mean, and I think that's the key word is empathy. I think that what I love about the film is that it transcends the poverty examination film, even from the Bunuel cold-eyed stare of that type of examination. It becomes, I wouldn't say metaphor because that sounds too airy fairy, but it becomes representative in your heart of just the human condition. The nightmare sequence in that film, which is probably my favorite nightmare sequence in any film ever, but he was the king of dream sequences, uh, is so unbelievably resonant. I remember seeing that as a kid, and I didn't grow up in the poor, the back streets of Mexico. And when that mother comes like sort of floating across the room towards him in his bed, and she is both loving and terrifying and sexualized. And it is so, I mean, it's just human. You can say you never have those thoughts because it's not okay to say that in public, but it's just true. And it's visceral. And the pain that he goes through in that film and the fear of Hybo, like to me, there's certain movies like this movie, Tree of Life, the Malick film, where the representation of childhood is like Proustian. Like it literally just takes me, and I didn't grow up in Texas, I didn't grow up in Mexico, but I'm just like, oh my God, I'm literally 8 years old in my backyard in St. Louis, having like this fear of the bully, and nightmares about my mom and dad, and like pain and fear, and like the world is scary. The world was always, I grew up during the Cold War, and we were always doing nuclear tests, and I thought we were going to die in an Armageddon. And so this idea of getting at the root of the human condition, and that's why I love it so much, and that's why I love it more than his later films, which are safer to me. And it's much easier to see Phantom of Liberty or Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie or Belle de Jour at a film festival with your fellow Met Opera subscribers, and all go out to dinner after and tut tut, what a great jab he made at the blah blah blah. But you ain't gonna do that with Los Olvidados, right? That's not gonna happen. And it's not, again, to provoke. It will puncture past all of that veneer and seat you in something so much more profound. And I think what you just said is exactly what it is. It's empathy. And that's why I love Bunuel, because he is not just a surrealist. He is not just a provocateur. He's not just a radical anarchist or whatever, or a radical atheist, as Dali accused him of being. I think he's actually quite spiritual. But man, does he force you to look at what the meaning of empathy is, and how hard it is to empathize and to get yourself to a place where you're really in the trenches with your fellow human. And to me, that is unbelievably hard to pull off, but it's such a great mission to have.
Yeah. I think he also doesn't yet have the device, like the escape hatch of abstract questions. Like the situations in his films get more and more absurdist, but they're also declarative, right? This is the problem. You're stuck with these people. You don't like these people either. They don't like themselves. What are you prepared to? It's like what Haneke did in Funny Games and Benny's Video, like the really cruel films where I feel like I'm not even needed to be there as an audience member.
Exactly. Yeah, that's going. To me, it's not like it lacks discipline, because Haneke is really, really gifted and works very hard, but it pushes into provocation. And I, like most human beings, I often rebel against. I'm like, my life is already hard. Why do I want to go to the movies and just have long cold needles very slowly placed into my eye sockets? Like, I'd really rather not. Thank you very much. I think if you look at, I think it's the Coker trilogy, right? The Kiarostami. If you look at Where's the Friend's Home, which is, again, pre-celebrated Kiarostami, but my favorite Kiarostami movie, and that trilogy is my favorite of his works, for similar to reason to Bunuel, where I feel like Kiarostami, who is a master and probably the great modern master of film, got a little safer as he got celebrated by the festivals, and the films almost became more about the types of people you'd see at festivals and the people in the village who were just trying to live their lives. And that film is similar, because it is about empathy and simplicity. It comes at it in a very different way than Bunuel, but it achieves a very similar end. Where it's not observational poverty porn. It is not. It is very immersive. You're with that kid. It's very visceral. And I would say it's almost like impossibly difficult to do. You look at a film like that, I'm thinking, how do you actually pull that off and not get mawkish or maudlin or observational or whatever? I just think these types of films are very, very rare.
Yeah. And I think centering the film on a kid automatically gives us the same sense of quasi-documentary realism, right? Unless it's like a Freaky Friday thing where it's objectively a fantasy and it's polished in a way that these films aren't. I'm going to mispronounce his name, I'm sure. Alfonso Mejia, the child actor who plays Pedro,
Yeah.
is so convincingly scared all the time, right? Like you
Yeah.
feel concerned for the kid as well as the character. And it works in Kiarostami's films as well because because he doesn't do so many close-ups, he pushes the kid. He shows you how alone they are in these landscapes. And Bunuel does the same thing. Like you are trapping these children in these situations where there are no helpful adults. In Kiarostami, adults just ask more questions and make things more complicated, which never helps children ever.
Yeah.
Parent figures are absent. It's authority, but not nurturing
Yeah.
figures that they encounter. And it's the same in Olvidados. The kid has no one. And he's being manipulated in every direction. And he's pushed further and further into corners that he doesn't understand. But it's so relentless as an audience to watch, or not relentless. It's a relentless experience. And as an audience to watch this kid not be saved
Yeah.
and not know how to save himself. What Bunuel does in Olvidados is he makes it violent rather than just like a lost child in Kiarostami is something to be upset about, but the kid's not lost. He just can't find
Right.
an address. He can go
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
But he has this mission and it's a noble mission. He is taking school books to a sick friend or an absent friend anyway, and only wants to do something good. There isn't even that option for Pedro. He's
Yeah.
just lost.
He is, and it is an inescapable trajectory, because because he is humanity, and we die, whether we die violently or otherwise, we are going to die. And so he's saying, it's not the Dickensian Oliver Twist. He's going to get saved by the rich family at the end. There's no rich family, and if there was, something horrible would happen with it. I mean, which is where Bunuel eventually did go with his cinema. Like, God forbid you end up with the Fernando Rey film with Catherine Deneuve, or any of his movies. Really,
Yeah.
the worst possible end is to end up with a rich family. That's the worst things will happen to you there. But yes, it's an inescapable trajectory, and obviously true to every stupid situation with making movies. They forced him to shoot a happy ending, which he didn't use. And I think someone, ill-advised released that version at some point. But and there were different versions of El Haibo's death and orchestra in the building, no orchestra in the building, things like that. But it is an inescapable trajectory. The way some people will complain about King Lear is just so bleak, and the ending is just I mean, Hamlet is too, but Lear is so unbelievably bleak. But it is an inescapable trajectory, but it's a necessary one for the catharsis of the story, right?
Yeah.
And you feel so much for this boy and for the predicament he's in, and for the fact that there's no way for it to end but the way it's going to end. That's part of the trap that you're in, and that is the idea of cinema as a trap appeals to me. And again, not as an abusive or sadistic way, which I find is juvenile, right? Or it's a cheap shot. It's too easy to do that. But with the aim of empathy ultimately is an amazing thing. It's just very hard. It's very, very hard to do.
It's rare that it works as well as it does. And it's even rarer that you never feel the calculation. Like the beginning of the film is so blunt. Just drop us in. We have to figure out who's who, what's going on. We don't understand the dynamics at first. And it's easy to identify with the kid. He's clearly the lead. Let's follow Pedro and see where he goes. And then you just realize he's being offered challenge after challenge after challenge that, again, and I keep coming back to this, it's not orchestrated. It's just how his life is. And so you sympathize with him even more quickly and root for him as he's, go kill some chickens, go go murder this person if you have to get out of your situation. You're still on side with him. And
Yeah.
it's not a thing that everyone can pull off as a filmmaker. And I get why they rebelled, why audiences didn't like it in 1951, because it won a prize. It's got a child. Why isn't it Bicycle Thieves?
Right.
But
Yes.
the act of making a different movie is the rebellion.
It is, and obviously it is, it has grown in stature with time, but it is still, as you said at the outset, hard to find. And
Yeah.
it is a tough pill to swallow. And Frida Kahlo got very mad at Bunuel at the premiere of this movie, and it got celebrated, but only I think because Octavio Paz like took it up as a a mission, and like campaigned really hard for Bunuel, and for the film, because the film wasn't really, it did not, it was met with derision in Mexico, and even though it won the prize at director prize at Cannes, I can't imagine it was everyone's favorite movie that year, like during the height of the neorealist phase, and even when Fellini's movies were pretty sweet. Um, but it is a beautiful, beautiful film that I do believe will stand the test. I mean, I feel for me, Buñuel's greatest works are like great works of philosophy. They really are that good. It's like reading, the best works of Kierkegaard or anyone who's on fire at that moment, before they lose their marbles, which thankfully Buñuel didn't do. But it is just such a. I did go back and watch it again. I mean, honestly, thankfully, I was lucky for. I did it a little while ago while I was working on Adulthood. I watched it a bunch of times, and I was just astounded at how well it holds up. It's so beautiful. It's so cinematic. It's so moving. It's entertaining. It's incredibly well shot and incredibly well acted, considering it has children in it. It is just so damn deftly made. It is a staggeringly, almost intimidating piece of cinema in that way. And the actor who plays El Haibo is so good, so good.
Roberto Cobo, yes, who I
Yeah,
I must have seen him in things. I know I
yeah, he went on
have.
to have a career. Yeah, yeah,
He was according to Wikipedia, he was in like 80 films in Mexico,
yeah,
but that was
yeah.
the first time I'd seen him.
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah,
And I had no idea, like, just he's so what's the like he's not inscrutable, but it's impossible to tell what he wants. Like,
yes,
is he playing with the kid? Is he leading him on? Is he grooming him to be an accomplice? Or
yeah,
does he hate him? And
yeah,
there's just nothing that gives away a direction in any of his deliveries, or his,
yeah.
like, even his posture is ambiguous. I found that absolutely fascinating. It's like, who?
Yeah, it's a very, very well crafted performance and well directed performance. And he is chaos without being over the top chaos. And I like over the top chaos sometimes. I'm, I do. I think it works really well sometimes, but it wouldn't have in this film. But he is chaos, right? He is the sort of brute animal nature of humanity without a clear definition, which we encounter all the time. And in fact, that's often what's the most scary thing about villains, when they're in real life as well as in drama, is you can't quite figure out what is motivating them. And usually the ones who are clearly motivated, like it's just greed, or it's just survival, or it's just I want to be the richest person in the world. They usually have their Iago, like they've got the other person who's doing all that stuff for. They're not that person, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? There's
Right.
someone else who is that person. Um, and I just think it's a beautiful, and at the same time, I felt for him, because I feel with El Haibo that circumstance and society and human nature colliding together has produced this thing that has made his life an inevitable trajectory, as much as the other boy, as much as the innocent. They're both on this careening path to death, and it's inescapable. And what we were saying before, you look at him too and think, why does it have to be this way? Why can he not have a future? Like, why does he have to have this future? And I love that about the film, is that I care about the blind man who's a total asshole. Hmm. You just end up caring about everyone, even though supposedly it's this cold examination movie where everyone's is bad underneath it. I so don't feel that way. By the end of the film, I'm really rooting for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, the best case scenario for Pedro is that he grows up to be El Hibo, which is not a
Right.
good, like, that's
No.
not a good ending either.
Yeah, no. And he would be a bad El Hibo, so he wouldn't, he doesn't have the cunning.
Yeah. This is the bit where I usually pivot to if there's anything in your own work that you've borrowed or lifted or outright just stolen in homage to the film you chose. And the obvious one is that Adulthood is produced by a production company called El Hibo.
Yeah, it's an independent film. It's mine. I put it together, and I own the LLC, and it was named after El Hibo, and not after the other child for kind of the reasons we just described. That to me, the ultimate act of empathy is to empathize with the most brutish character and to find humanity in that character. And adulthood is farcical, but that's kind of a driving theme of that. Is I remember on set one day, Kaya was like, "Aren't audiences just going to hate us?" I'm like, "I don't think they will actually." I think partly because it's comedy, and even though it gets dark, but because you guys are human beings and you're trying. You are delusional and you do terrible things. Um, but you have been set on a course that you can't escape from, given the stressors of your life. And I mean, Bunuel's in everything for me, and my doc approach from the beginning has been very Bunuelian in terms of influence. My documentaries are almost all somewhat dichotomous in the sense that people will say, "Oh, is downloaded my Napster film, is that in support of the tech kids or is it in support of the labels?" I'm like, "Well, watch the film carefully, right?" And there's answers there, but it's not didactic. It's not one side or the other. It's kind of hopefully forcing people. Deep Web is kind of the most aggressive act of that, I would say, because it's looking at someone who created a drug market website. You could argue sympathetically. Is it an act of advocacy? No, of course it isn't. Is the film just a piece of straight political activism? No, it's exactly the opposite of that. I would say, but it can be polarizing. So again, it's not for the sake of to be provocative, which is not my thing, but it is to look at empathy, to try to help drive towards empathy and understanding the incredible complexity of human nature. So it's kind of in all of my stuff. And those three films, Land Without Bread, Los Olvidados, and L'Age d'Or, I think are the triple crown of that type of cinema. And there are many other great works, like we talked about Kurosami. There's so many that are, and Malik and people that are really good at doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about watching A Hidden Life in 2019, and just like that is what would you do and why aren't you doing it? It's the only question that matters.
It is, yeah. And I think right now in our present climate, it is the most confounding question that most people I know face. They don't know what to do. And in the absence of doing something, we are seeing what happens. We are seeing who takes over. And that they will keep going until we do something. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah, I keep thinking now about Godot, right? Like, who are we waiting for, really?
Yeah, yeah. And who are we waiting for and what do we want from them? And this Beckett notion of being trapped all together. Vladimir, Estragon, Patso, Lucky, the boy are all trapped. In our presentation of the play, the way Jamie's conceived it, we are literally trapped, which is very beautiful and really fun to act in. But the audience is trapped, and that's intentional. Beckett didn't want the play filmed for only that reason. He said, "I wrote the play to take a group of people in seats and a group of people on stage and trap them in a room together to confront these questions." And to me, the play is all about empathy and emotion and not about like, is there a God? Isn't there a God? Is life meaningless? Is there a meaning? Like, come on, you can't watch that play and think life is meaningless. I mean, it is, we end that play just wrecked emotionally. Every flipping night, we're just a wreck. And I'm like, I'm not walking the stage like, "Oh, well, we dabbled in the philosophical questions of life. God, no God," meaning like, no, it's like, it's everything, and love and empathy and companionship. And, to me, that's like, it forces you to confront some of that.
And I will just personally say that I am so excited that you guys get to do this together and trick an audience into coming and seeing what you do.
Which is 100% what we're doing. Yeah.
My thanks to Alex Winter, whose new film Adulthood is in select theaters today and coming to digital later this month. And of course, probably right this second, he's on Broadway with Keanu Reeves in Waiting for Godot at the Hudson Theater. Previews are currently underway, and the official opening is Sunday, September 28th. Tickets and showtimes are available at godotbroadway.com. Thanks also to Tiffany Malloy. She knows what she did. You can find Alex on Blue Sky at alexwinter.com, and you can find Los Olvidados on YouTube and the Internet Archive. But it's long overdue for a decent physical release. I'll make some calls. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 41 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, get the boosters while you can. I'll see you next week.